And this makes perfect sense when you recognize that the role of testosterone, as previously stated, is to facilitate competitive behavior, motivation, and success. Gentlemen, unfortunately since the 1900s, testosterone levels have been dropping precipitously over the years, and it's estimated that at least 20% of total mean T levels have dropped in the last 20 years. So with those kind of figures spiking alarming thoughts, we have to be asking ourselves the question, something has gone seriously awry. Now, because testosterone can be better described as the lifeblood of all men, I thought that you would indulge me in a little investigation today into some of the blood-sucking tropes that are draining men of our high T levels in modern world today. Now, without boring you in respects to the medical jargon that is related to the functionality of high testosterone in the body, I think it's very important to our understanding and execution of some of the tasks that will remedy our low T levels, that we have a respect for the role testosterone plays in the body. So without further ado, testosterone is the biological building blocks for men. It is a key hormone that signals and communicates to the body the need for a certain change. Now, these changes can encompass a wide range of different things and can act in a good or in a bad way depending on where our levels are today. For example, one of the key balancing acts that our body has to play is to regulate the relationship between testosterone but also cortisol also. Both are signaling hormones, but both signal two completely different things. Cortisol prioritizes more of your stress response, overcoming stress and danger. It's going to upregulate fat storages for survival, and it's going to deregulate muscle gain and muscle growth. And it is also responsible to a lot of the negative emotions that we experience every single day. Your stress, your anxiety, your depression, all of these negative emotions that we just don't enjoy. Testosterone, however, on the other hand, prioritizes reproduction and competitive success. It downregulates fat storage, upregulates muscle bulk, muscle growth, and it also gives us those confident feelings of well-being, success, and also motivation as well. Now, perhaps on that latter point, you are starting to tie the pieces together and start to come to the conclusion of some of the things that you might need to do to upregulate your T levels, which is great. However, we will speak a little bit more in detail in respects to some of the nuances to those practices and also some supplementation suggestions as we go along. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about the influences testosterone has on our neurology. Too much talk, I feel, in my opinion, is directed towards the physical benefits of increased testosterone levels in the body. And if you are of that same inclination, then please feel free to skip ahead and fondle yourself to some of the benefits that you might experience. However, if you are curious about the role that high T does play once it permeates the blood-brain barrier, then stick here, and I'm sure some of these following points will be quite illuminating. Now, take a medically recognized individual who has been diagnosed as having low testosterone, hypogonadism. This would be an individual who has been recorded at a testosterone level of 350 nanograms per deciliter. What do you think that individual experiences on a day-to-day basis? Besides the kind of physical symptoms such as low libido, poor or weak or erectile dysfunction entirety, and also low fertility. Beyond those physical implications, what do you think is experienced by the individual? These individuals suffer extreme negative emotions, from neurotic tendencies that we talked about previously, stress, anxiety, depression, to insomnia, irritability, also fatigue, and most curiously of them all, a diminishment in their cognitive faculties. That is correct. There is a strong relationship between low T levels and your intellectual performance, and more specifically, your ability to focus and concentrate on tasks with intensity and for duration. And this makes perfect sense when you recognize that the role of testosterone, as previously stated, is to facilitate competitive behavior, motivation, and success. It's also got a high correlation with status-seeking behavior, which would mean that you would be also to see a correlation between those individuals who are climbing up the dominance hierarchy and, that's right, an increased level of testosterone in their blood. Now, imagine the effects on your workplace or entrepreneurial pursuits if you were able to have a firmer grip on your hormonal levels, You're talking about increased focus, increased concentration, which would do better on your memory, your learning, your cognitive function in general. So I really think this aspect of boosting your testosterone can't be talked about enough for those individuals that are in apathy. Now, I can already see people typing on their keyboards about how they can check where their levels are today. Don't worry, I do have a test kit that I also use that is really, really good and really awesome and discreet. Now we've arrived, let's look at the physical implications high testosterone has on the human body. Now let's start with the obvious. Hair growth. Hair growth in your armpits, hair growth on your face, hair growth on your chest, hair growth even in the noses and ears of some of you Bigfoot looking chads. With increased T levels also comes in close accompaniment with a higher level of skeletal muscle, the density and also the growth opportunities for that skeletal muscle. We also need to be sensitive towards the fact the relationship testosterone has on growth hormone, and it will secrete it more in abundance. Not just muscle growth, but bone growth. Bone density will increase as a consequence of your levels going up and up and up. That means the likelihood that you'll suffer fractures and breaks, and your bones will be generally a lot less porous, which is a benefit, perhaps if you're a martial artist, if you're a kickboxer, for example. What's more is the effect it has on fat burning. Like I mentioned, the ratio between testosterone and cortisol, when we upregulate testosterone, there's a diminishment in cortisol, which means we're likely to burn fat at a higher level. You'll also be carving out those muscle bellies, and you're going to get your ab veins and bicep veins to see in all their glory. Now, a final curious benefit is the deepening of the voice. Higher levels of T actually, they cause the vocal cords to lengthen and also thicken, which means the vibrancy in which it vibrates is a lot deeper in pitch. Now, before we get into the natural interventions that will allow us to lean as hard as we can into those high testosterone practices that will bring those T levels back up, we need to talk about testing to see where they are prior to any of the changes that we make. I think this is really educational and also really interesting, as you can kind of take your own biological profile and experiment with, what is working really well for you, what isn't working so well. So make sure you get a baseline before you do anything. Now, this does bring me onto the sponsor of today's video, Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked offer discreet at-home tests delivered to your door in order for you to find out this information before you implement anything yourself. They have a really easy to follow test kits, which just require a simple blood sample from yourself. You send this off, and a few days later you get a text message from one of their clinical staff with your results, and you can even request a phone call from one of their nurses to talk through what your results mean. I've used Let's Get Checked many times myself, and I really appreciate the professional work they do. I am a sponsor of Let's Get Checked, so if you want to support myself, support the channel, then there'll be a link in the description below with a link to their website and also a code for 30% off their test kits. So other than shooting trend directly into our butt cheeks, what are some of the natural ways that we can improve our testosterone levels? Now, whenever I'm thinking about bringing kind of benefit in my life, I first look at what I'm doing at the moment that is fucking that up. So I look at first, what can I subtract before what I can add to make and improve this particular change. In short, what are you doing right now that is killing your T, in which there are three? The first one is sleep, and you knew this one was coming. I think this grind 24/7 narrative, although it's a romantic one, is a false one. There has to be a balance to how you're behaving. There has to be a yin to the yang. If you're not adequately recovering from the work that you're doing every day in the gym, at work, or any of your other pursuits, then you're setting yourself up for just a catastrophe in your hormonal profile. You need to be making sure that you are getting a minimum of 8 hours sleep every single night. And I would even add onto this, a personal tip from myself is go to bed an hour before your allotted time. So say, for example, you go to bed at midnight every night and you wake up at 8 o'clock. Weird example, but an example nonetheless. You want to be in bed at 11 o'clock. So an hour before you would get your 8 hours to account for any restlessness. And because you're not, as soon as you're hitting the pillow, you're not sleeping solidly for 8 hours. So make sure you're in bed an hour before to account for any sleep loss. Number 2 is food. Now, beyond the trite suggestions like eat more red meat, I want to take the time to focus on 2 hormones that 90% of men do not have any sensitivity towards in their eating pattern. Number 1 is estrogen. Now, specifically soy products are going to have an estrogenic effect inside the body. And you want to be looking at animal products. Animal products where they're raised on soy, vegetable, corn. This is all a synonym for soy-based products, and they're estrogenic in nature. If you're buying any kind of beef, you want grass-fed and ideally organic if you can. That's going to diminish those estrogens in your blood. Another big one is beer, in which I've never really understood the beer is masculine narrative. It's full of estrogens, it makes you fat, it gives you tits, and there's also strong links with prostate cancer. So my suggestion would be to limit and also just get rid of it in your diet altogether if you can. Drink it as and when, maybe social arrangements, and even minimize those arrangements. Number 2 is insulin, which is the hormone that regulates your blood sugar. Now, too much refined sugar and processed carbohydrates like your rice, like your pasta, like your bread are going to have a catastrophic effect on the amount of sugar in your blood and therefore the amount of insulin that's created. Anybody that has a body fat percentage of over 25%, it is having a cataclysmic effect on your overall T levels, and you would do well to implement something like intermittent fasting to control your insulin and minimizing those kind of foods in your diet. And last but not least, the one to subtract in your diet has to be stress. Another perhaps trite saying, but like I prefaced, high T and cortisol relationship are very, very important. Whenever you can kind of diminish cortisol, which is the better way to think of cortisol is the hormone of stress. And whenever you can reduce that, if you can stop doing tasks that are causing you I know easier said than done, they would have a benefit for your testosterone levels. But there's also other things that you can do, such as implement any kind of mindfulness practices, which is getting into the addition part of what we can do to better facilitate high T levels in our blood. So number 1, let's start with number 1, things we can do: mindfulness. So mindfulness practice is really important by actively bringing the body from a sympathetic response in the body, that's the fight and flight, stress response, cortisol secreting response, to rest and digest, parasympathetic response, relaxation. That's what mindfulness does. So meditation and any kind of breathing practice where you're exaggerating your exhalation. So this is inhalation, exhalation, that is exaggerating and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So for me personally, I make sure I'm meditating at least 20 minutes before I go to bed, brings me into parasympathetic response, and it also facilitates good sleep, which, as you'll recall, is one of the things that we should be aiming for. So that's a really good habitual practice you can start getting into. Number 2 has to be exercise. Now, not any kind of exercise. It has to be high intensity, high impact forms of exercise. Running and aerobic exercise has their place and their benefits for the cardiovascular system, but to get the real spikes in testosterone, you have to be doing weighted lifts, and ideally compound weighted lifts, movements where you're utilizing a lot of muscles on the body, more than one muscle involved in a movement. So your compound lifts, your deadlifts, your squats, your deadlifts, bench press, and especially the legs. The bigger the muscle group you're stimulating, the bigger in spike in testosterone that you will experience. Now, and last but not least, number 3, supplementation. What are some of the things that we can do to better facilitate high T in terms of supplementation? Well, beyond the kind of maybe more abstract ones like your ashwagandha, fenugreek, Korean ginseng, Tunga Ali, which all have testaments to high T, I wouldn't experiment with those until I've got what I like to call the big 3 already implemented in your diet. So number 1 is vitamin D. Vitamin D we should ideally be getting from the sun, but people working from home, people stuck in office cubicles, people maybe in areas of the world where they don't get a lot of sunlight, like some of the Scandinavian countries, you need to be supplementing at least 4,000 IUs of vitamin D every single day. You're looking at increased T levels between 18 and 30% just by correcting this deficiency, which is even more alarming when you think about 1 in 10. So 1 in 10 of you watching this video will be deficient in the D. Now, number 2 of the big 3 is zinc. Now, zinc has the same kind of effects that vitamin D does on the testosterone levels, as long as you're supplementing with at least 30 milligrams every single day. And last but not least, we also need to be considering magnesium. Now, magnesium can be thought of the element of relaxation. When we were talking about cortisol, again, magnesium is that element that is going to bring us back into the parasympathetic relaxation response into the body. So I always take my magnesium before bed, and it's really, really good if you're already doing a kind of high intensity weightlifting kind of training program. So that's your vitamin D, that's your zinc, that's your magnesium. They need to be staples in your diet, in your supplementation stack. And there you have it, gentlemen. That is the roadmap from going to low T to high T, of not just looking better physically and with those heightened masculine features, but also feeling better, thinking better, and performing better on the dominance hierarchy. I'm thinking of doing another video on the more unconventional types of practices of boosting T, icing your balls, sunning your perineum, and even, of course, semen retention. So if you are interested in what I find there, please do share it in the comments below, and I'll follow up with another video on those topics very, very soon. But other than that, if you subscribe to what I said, you can subscribe to me, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care, gents.